Welcome, welcome to everyone who's coming in the room here with us this morning, or whatever time it is for you. All right, see some familiar faces. Hey, feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat while we're waiting for folks. Feel free to just share who you are, where you're at, what you're doing with your life. Kind of get a feel of where everyone's at this morning.
I love seeing some of these familiar faces. I know Ruben and Tori and Karen and Troy, Andrea, Megan, Todd, Bethany. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, right on. Very cool. Yeah, feel free to just type in the chat who you are, where you're from, introduce yourself. Right on.
Todd, I want to know who illustrated your profile picture because it's really cool.
I know, that is really cool. I want one of those.
Yeah, that was me. That was a long time ago before they became popular. I can't even remember how I did it.
What? You drew that? That's awesome.
No, I didn't draw it. I just
Oh.
I went to some program and just created it. Yeah.
Just own it. Yeah.
Love it.
Very cool. Right on. Oh, they're generating here. We've got James in the UK. We've got Jeff. Let's see. Ruben, Megan, Tori. All right. Very cool. Yeah, I'd love to hear where everyone's from. We'll give folks a few minutes to sort of catch up and let their Zoom load, and we'll jump in here in a minute.
I did have a sort of survey question that I thought we could ask while we're...
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, on a scale from 0 to 10, how much do you feel like your church is already carbon neutral, zero waste, thinking through all these things? So 0 would be like, we haven't even started, and 10 would be like, we do all the things and all of our congregants do all the things. Everybody's on board with saving the planet. We recycle and compost and have a community garden. Like, to just kind of ballpark where your current church is at.
All right. Interesting responses. I'm curious about some of these responses because I'm pretty sure a couple of these people are in my church, so you have to figure out what's going on there. Right on, right on. That's a good question. Yeah, and if you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself, feel free to type that into the chat. We'll give it maybe one more minute. 7 for thinking about it, 3 for doing anything about it. That's good. Let's have an honest reflection here. Right on. Good. Very cool. Well, as we're getting critical mass here, nice. As we're getting critical mass here, I'll go ahead and give a few housekeeping things. Definitely encourage everyone to just sort of keep yourself on mute as we are going through the webinar and the presentation this morning with Brit. And then we're going to leave some time at the end for some question and answers. And so either during that time, you're welcome to sort of unmute yourself and just sort of throw your thing out there, or if a question pops in your head as we're going through all this, feel free to just go ahead and type that into the chat, and we'll kind of try to scroll back through and catch all those.
Caleb, can I have like 60 more seconds because my chickens just jumped the fence?
Oh my gosh, Brett,
I'll be right
gotta go get
back.
your chickens. Well, there goes the webinar, folks. Sorry. You know, when the person who is supposed to be giving the webinar is 9 months pregnant and her chickens get out, right? It's like, well, there's that, you know, that time. So a couple housekeeping things while she's going out. So yeah, so try to keep yourself on mute, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. Again, I'm Caleb. I work with Brett and some others with Nazarenes for Creation Care. We are a grassroots group of farmers and students and scientists and teachers and pastors within our Nazarene tribe who are working to try to mobilize and equip and educate and do more things like this to really reconnect those dots for us between caring for God's creation and what it means to be a holiness people. And so it's a lot of fun work. This is this webinar series is sponsored for us by the NTS Center for Pastoral Leadership, which is really cool. If you are Nazarene clergy, this is a lifelong learning event, so you can count that toward your lifelong learning. And let me go ahead and give you that code. I'll type that in, and then I'll try to remember to put it one more time at the end, but that is 41110. And so if you go to learning.nazarene.org, you can put that in there for your lifelong learning hours. Trying to think what else. So also stay tuned for information for, we're doing 3 of these. There'll be another one in June. We've got someone speaking from the Evangelical Environmental Network talking about what it means to be clean energy / pro-life in the local church. And then we're doing another one in July that focuses on food, that our own Reverend Megan Pardue will be leading on how to eat together. There she is. Holler. And
everybody.
So stay tuned for those. Super excited about those. And yeah, I think that's, did you catch your chickens? Are we good? Okay.
Yeah, I'm missing one, but I think it's in the coop, so I'm not worried about it.
Okay, well, that's for serious. So we actually just got a chicken coop, but I haven't been brave enough to actually put any chickens in it yet. So I'm building myself up to it. So right on, guys. So let me introduce, many of y'all already know Brit. She is one of the pastors at OKC First Church of the Nazarene in Oklahoma City. She's passionate about the planet. Since she was a little kid, she found her way to a low-waste lifestyle and gardening within the last 5 to 10 years, and she lives with her husband, 5 housemates, 11 chickens, if that's right, 1 dog, and soon-to-be baby Bolerjack. And Britt is currently pursuing a doctorate of ministry in land, food, and faith formation from Memphis Theological Seminary. So I'm going to hand it over to Britt. Give her a hand, and we'll dive into some of this stuff of how to zero low waste in the local church. So.
Okay, so I have kind of half an hour of sharing, I think, but I can't really see everyone, so don't try to like raise your hand or get my attention or something. Save your question for the end, because I'm gonna try to kind of like, I almost said zoom through this, but that's not, anyway, I'm gonna try to go through it pretty quickly. So if you've got something, like, yeah, keep tabs on it, because I would love to hear the questions, and I'm sure a lot of you will end up with maybe like some specific questions about something your church is doing, and that's awesome. I want to hear those too. So like Caleb said, I'm Brit Bolerjack. I'm one of the pastors at Oklahoma City First Church of the Nazarene. With my husband Aaron, he is the executive pastor, and I am the college and young adult pastor, and we've been there 6-ish years. We love them, and yeah, I could say so many things about my church, but we'll keep going. So when I was a kid, we lived in Seattle, Washington, and it was kind of a chaotic time. I was the oldest of 3 kids. We lived there until I was 7, and so I had two little sisters, 5 and 3. And you can imagine it was a little crazy. And we lived in this cul-de-sac that had a median. And there were these really tall, straight trees, 3 big trees in this median. And I found that if I would walk out my front door and cross the cul-de-sac street, that I could like climb up these trees and feel safe and have a place to kind of be alone, kind of escape the chaos. I'm a 9 on the Enneagram, so I just need a little, you know, like breather, debriefing. And it was a really kind of chaotic time in my family. During this time, my dad had his first season of mania. He was bipolar. We didn't know it at the time. And so he stopped working and sleeping, and my mom didn't really know what to do with us. She was a stay-at-home mom at the time. And she, that summer, broke her leg and was like, okay, I have this husband I'm not sure what to do with, and my leg is broken and I'm caring for these 3 kids. Like, something's got to give. So we ended up moving in with my grandparents in Oklahoma, because that's where she was from. And lucky for me, they had this really big tree in their backyard. It had really smooth bark and these like big trunks. And I was able to kind of go up there and sit up there. And it produced these like weird like pea pod things. And I would like throw them at people. And it was just kind of like my little, you know, safe space. And I would pretend to like have tea parties and eat lunch and stuff out there. But after about 6 months, we got back on our feet and moved into a place that we rented on our own. But we went to my grandparents every Sunday for lunch. My grandmother would make us chicken fried steak and mashed potatoes and gravy. And I would, you know, finish the meal and like go in the backyard and hang out in this tree. And so one day we got there and lunch wasn't ready yet. And I was like, hi, Grandma, hi, Grandpa. And I ran to the backyard and the tree was gone. There was just this little stump left. And I wept and wept and wept and sat on this stump. And I just couldn't stop saying, my tree, my tree. And my dad came out and he was like trying to console me. And, you know, he was trying to explain why they had to cut the tree down. And of course, when you're 8, like these things just don't make that much sense. And I was just like, yeah, but this was my friend. And I really feel like something clicked for me that day. It took me a long time, like a couple decades, even maybe, to digest and figure out what I was going to do with it. But I just decided I didn't want to do to nature what my parents, my family, my grandparents had done to this tree. And that was the beginning for me, I think, of this kind of awakening of like, these things matter and how we care for them matters. So fast forward a long time and I graduated college, and my husband and I moved to Stillwater for his master's degree in history. And we had not like merged our things yet. We were just getting married and moving. So he packed up everything he had and I packed up everything I had. And we ended up like calculating it and needing a 26-foot U-Haul. And I still remember when it pulled up, he looked at me and he was like, we are never doing this again. And I was like, yeah, you're totally right. And at this point, you know, we had just been in college. So like, it's not like this like extremely valuable stuff that we had like built up over the years or whatever. It was just like junk from our dorm rooms. And so we trucked this stuff to Stillwater, try to fit it in our little bitty apartment. And it was a mess. It was a disaster in every sense of the word. And it really taught us from day one of our marriage that we just didn't want to live this kind of lifestyle. It came with a lot of baggage, and it came with a lot of waste, and it came with a lot of commitment to stuff. And so 2 years later, when he finished his master's, we answered a call to be missionaries in Europe, 2 years in Poland and 2 years in England. I think I have a few slides of that stuff. But we packed up everything into 2 suitcases and a carry-on and gave the rest of it to Goodwill. I remember feeling such relief watching the last few boxes be taken to Goodwill, because we sold almost all of it. And just feeling like some kind of freedom from having like so little attachment to things. And it was really, really nice. So we lived for 4 years in Europe, very tiny apartments, and got back, rented something pretty quick because we were in a hurry to get settled and figure out what we're doing with our lives. And soon after that 1 year lease was up, we were trying to figure out what's next. And it didn't feel right to just move into a house. We had been in an apartment for 4 years, well, 6 years, counting Stillwater. And we had learned to live with so much less on so much less. And so we decided we would build a tiny house. And that dream was like exciting, but also we realized it would take a lot of time and energy. And then we discovered Airstreams. So we bought this Airstream International. It's a 1973 from a guy who was storing it in his front yard in Arkansas, and carted it back to Oklahoma. It spent 11 months kind of redoing the inside with as many like reclaimed materials as we could. But it had like couch, bathroom, kitchen, counter space. 12 feet of counter space actually was so nice. Those are the chemistry lab desks from SNU, because they were redoing their science building at the same time we were redoing the Airstream. So we were able to like buy a lot of reclaimed stuff from SNU. And it had a queen size bed, and we eventually built a deck, which really helped make it feel bigger because square footage wise, it's like 204 square feet, but the deck was 160. So we used to joke that the deck was like half our house. But it was a joy to live in. We were there for 2 years and 3 months. We had friends from church who let us park it in their backyard. You can kind of see the kind of edge of their house. And it was really a gift, honestly, in so many ways. But it did become claustrophobic after a while. I think tiny houses are fun, but even I can't do them forever necessarily. Although maybe if it had higher ceilings, I think about that a lot. Anyway, whatever. The ceilings were 6 feet, 4 inches. But around that same time, we got chickens, as you may have noticed. And we have been vegetarian for 7 years at this point. So the chickens were kind of providing us eggs and companionship. What really happened was I wanted a pet, and you cannot have pets in an Airstream. I don't know if you've ever attempted pets in an Airstream, but you shouldn't. And so we ended up being like, what kind of animal can we have outside? So we landed on chickens, and it worked out great. And then in late 2017, I found this graphic. How long does it take for garbage to decompose? And I'll be honest, it freaked me out a little bit because I had spent a lot of time thinking about the carbon footprint of our food. We were eating mostly local food at this point, vegetarian at the time. And it was, something we had thought a lot about, but I hadn't thought a lot about our garbage and our plastic use. So I challenged myself for January of 2018 to go zero waste for 30 days. And it was a lot of things that I was already doing. I was already using bamboo toothbrushes, but I did make my own toothpaste for the first time, which was an adventure, and I still do that now. I switched from a plastic dish brush to a compostable dish brush, which are great for Instagram, but not super awesome for real life. They're kind of expensive and actually harder to compost than you might think. And then I made myself this little like utensil kit out of like silverware and stuff that we already had, so that I could go to a restaurant. Restaurants. Anyway, I could go to a restaurant and like take my own utensils and my straw and my cloth napkin and like not need anything. So this is the first time I ever ate out on the challenge. I went to Jason's Deli. Don't know if you have Jason's Deli, but they have this like kiosk situation where you can swipe your card and then go through the salad bar. So I swiped my card and I just went, like, I just ignored the people like trying to hand me a bowl, and I filled up my little to-go container and ate it, on the go. And it was like, I felt, very satisfied with myself. I have no idea health code wise if you're allowed to do this because I didn't ask permission. This is another one of those meals that I packed instead of eating out. And I also learned to make some things that I don't make anymore necessarily, but these were experiments. This is orange juice, almond milk, and raw raspberry jam. or blackberry jam. And the jam I still do is super easy. Juice, I still juice things all the time. Almond milk is a huge pain. I don't know if you've ever made almond milk, and I can't see all of you to like take a survey in this moment, but dang, it took me like an hour plus, and then I had, you can see here, 2.5 cups of almond milk, and hated my life. So it just didn't seem super worth it. You basically like blend the almonds, you soak the almonds in water for 8 hours, and then you blend them up, and then you pour them through a cheesecloth, and you've got to like wring the cheesecloth out, which feels really gross. I don't know, maybe I'm a texture person and I just can't do it. But anyway, it was delicious. So like highly recommend if you are just desperate for fresh almond milk, although I would suggest oat instead. That's a different story for a different time. This is one of the experiments that didn't work out for me so well. In Japan, no one uses Q-tips. This is a stainless steel ear pick. So if you are familiar kind of with Japanese culture, these are ubiquitous and everybody uses them. I could not personally bring myself to use it. I thought maybe it was because it was like too big. So I bought a second one that's even smaller. And it still just like freaked me out way too much. So I still do not use these. In fact, I still have them. If you get inspired and you would like to pick your ear with a piece of stainless steel, I can mail it to you as long as you sign some kind of waiver or something. But yeah, so theoretically that would have worked great, except it didn't work great. And then I started learning to buy things in bulk or from bulk sections. This is a display of soap. We get our soap from the farmer's market now in a very similar fashion, but baked goods where you could kind of like take your cloth napkin and grab what you needed and keep going. These are bulk bins at Winco. If you have a Winco, man, they're just amazing. I don't know if you have a Winco, but they have everything in bulk. I mean, from salt and pepper to pasta noodles, beans and rice, like loose popcorn kernels, like anything you need that is a dry good, you can purchase from Winco in bulk. And I just take my own bags, my own like muslin bags that I made, and fill them up myself. And according to the guy at our Winco, as long as you don't touch any of their utensils to your bag, you are allowed to use reusable bags. Now, I don't know if anybody at your Winco is like super picky, or if you're like Colorado and you just passed laws against using reusable bags. But anyway, check with where you are before you just like waltz in and whatever. But even still, like even if you use the kind of plasticky like produce bag situation that they offer, that's probably less packaging than if you bought that product, you know, in a plastic bag, in a cardboard box with a sticker on it kind of thing. So it's, you know, it's whatever. So this was like an average like grocery store moment. For produce, I just take one of the stickers and put it on the outside of the bag. For other things, I record the number on my phone, like in my notes app, and then they pick it up and I'm like, that's oats, it's 9106, because, you know, that each product has a 4 or 5 digit like number that goes with it so that they can ring it up. And as long as you have that written down somewhere, you don't actually need a sticker, at least at Winco. So this is my first grocery shopping experience doing the zero waste challenge. It took me 4 stores to find everything that I wanted, like that we needed from our grocery list, without packaging. So this is not something I do on a regular basis, but I did learn a lot of lessons. And to this day, I kind of go to a different store every week just to get a different thing that I need and buy like a month's worth and, you know, kind of rotate a little bit. So I'm still doing a lot of this, especially now that most of our stores here have started going back to allowing bulk bins, because for the pandemic, a lot of places just like shut down the kind of bulk bin aisle for a while. But you have like everything you need, right? Bread, trail mix, almonds, quinoa, chickpeas, rice. These were chocolate chips. I found gummy bears in bulk bins. Oh, that was a moment. I was having a moment. It was so good. And then like all the produce that we needed for the week. And this is kind of the trash that was created from that shopping trip. But yeah, like I said, this is not sustainable long-term necessarily. And it's definitely a thing of privilege to be able to go 4 places and take, 3 or 4 hours to do your grocery shopping. So this is not something even I do like every single time now, but it taught me a whole lot and helped me kind of figure out the stores in my area. So it was really good as an exercise for me. This is the most helpful thing that came out of my challenge. So I would find myself at a coffee shop or a restaurant or a grocery store and not have the reusable doodad that I needed to do what I needed to do. So some people in like commuter cities where they're using like the J train to get to work, I have seen them take like an extra little backpack full of reusable stuff. And I was like, well, that's awesome, but I also like drive a lot of places. So maybe I need a set of stuff in my car. So I had this crate and I kind of put all the reusable things that I kept forgetting in my car, and they live in my car now. And I still have this, I still use it, but I had like a couple of coffee cups, cold coffee cup with a straw, a jar just for whatever, water bottle, canvas bags, bulk bin bags, cloth napkins, to-go container. So it was like anytime I was somewhere, and the to-go container especially is really great. Like, you get done with your meal on the patio at wherever, and instead of being like, hey, can I get a to-go box? You just run out to your car, you grab a thing, scrape your food into it, like nobody cares. So all of these have come in really handy, and they still live in my car, almost just like that. So this is the first week of trash that I created. You can see I kind of threw away my dish brush, and I had a little home improvement project that had some scraps. I don't remember what that is. Oh, bath tissue, toilet paper, tortillas, black bean Merinos, coffee is not zero waste, and who cares, right? And you got to do what you got to do. And this is week 3 of my trash. So I'm just kind of giving you some examples. But this is a paper plate from a party that is not recyclable. Blueberry bag from the frozen food section that I had before I went on the challenge. This is a Starburst wrapper because somebody was like, hey, do you want a Starburst? And I was like, yeah, I want a Starburst. And as soon as they handed it to me, I was like, I'm going to have to put this in my trash bag. And that was a huge bummer. But then this is a Ferrero Rocher. And somebody offered this to me, and I was like, yes, I want that, fully knowing that this was going to go in my trash bag, like so worth it. So you make some compromises, and I definitely didn't go zero waste, but I learned a lot. And I learned things like this: every plastic toothbrush you've ever used is still on the planet somewhere. So the little plastic toothbrushes that your parents used on you when you were 1.5 are still on the planet somewhere. They cannot be recycled. They're not recyclable. And instead of breaking down into something the environment can use that goes back into the soil or the ocean or whatever, plastic, especially in this situation, doesn't actually biodegrade. It simply breaks down into tinier and tinier and tinier pieces. Eventually we refer to them as like microplastics. Some of them are like hard to see with the naked eye, but they are still persisting in the environment. So it may not be like a whole toothbrush, but definitely that plastic still exists somewhere. I also learned that in 2017, the EPA studied our trash, including recycling. So this is including stuff that you put in a recycling bin. And 8.4% in 2017 actually got recycled. This graphic is a little misleading because it looks like it's less than 5, but it's 8.4. Oh, because that's tons. Right, never mind. Yeah, so 8.4% of the stuff that you put in the trash, in the recycling, in the wherever, like actually ended up getting recycled. So it's very little of what we're producing. And we could talk about the issues with recycling all day long. And if you have questions about that, I'm happy to try to troubleshoot them. But this was really discouraging to me. So it made me want to reduce my intake of single-use plastics. and non-recyclables so that I wouldn't have to recycle as much. So I produced less than 2 pounds of trash in my 30-day challenge. The average American produces 4.2 pounds of trash per day. So I did not make it to zero waste, but I did make it to less than an average day for an American, which at the time felt like a big accomplishment. But mostly I learned a lot. I'll be honest. It was more formative for me than it was like I saved the planet in 30 days. And very soon after this, within a month or two, we actually moved into the house that we were living behind. So we lived behind this house with the Airstream. We moved into the house, and in order to kind of build community, but also to really like focus on our carbon footprint, we invited people to live with us to fill up all the rooms. So we have 5 housemates. We currently have 4. We're kind of in transition until next week. And I love them. Most of them have been with us for 2 to 3 years or more, since we've lived in the house more than 3 years. But it's been such a joy to share life together. Of course, it's not always easy, but it's way less impact on the planet than if we were all kind of living in our separate apartments and going our separate ways. It's been a really interesting experiment in kind of energy conservation with a community. And we enrolled in wind power as soon as we moved into the house. So Oklahoma has this really incredible program where you literally log into your energy portal and click a button. And you can tell from here, it's costing us about $6.9. I just updated this morning, so it's accurate. $6.9 extra per month to be enrolled in the wind power program through the state of Oklahoma. And totally worth it in our minds for our community of 7. It's less than $1 a piece to be able to kind of rely on wind energy for our energy use, which is really nice. And I found a couple of books, and I just wanted to introduce you to 2 because, gosh, there are so many. We could keep talking about them all day, but I wanted to introduce you to Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. If you have not flipped through this, first of all, it's gorgeous. It's a coffee table book. I mean, really. At least it's on my coffee table. Maybe it's not a coffee table book to you, but it's a coffee table book to me. But they have taken this team of scientists and fellows, 1,700 scientists and fellows, and evaluated 100 ways to save the planet, and essentially put them through a computer program with some AI and an algorithm. I'm not really sure. I didn't really understand that part. But at the end of the 2 years of study, they clicked a button and the program was able to rank these solutions in order of impact and importance. So it's fascinating if you're a data person to flip through this and think about how much you're saving the planet with what you're doing. So just as a quick screenshot, this is the top 10 ways to save the planet. And there's probably some things on here that you don't necessarily think about. Educating women and girls is a big deal because women who graduate from high school tend to have fewer kids, but also are able to take better care of them because they're kind of splitting up their resources differently. And those, are people that have an impact on the planet, so it's like a long-term generational thing that eventually that makes a huge difference. But there's a lot of stuff on here that we normally think about. Household recycling is solution number 55. Wind turbines onshore are solution number 2. LED lighting in your home is solution number 33. So all of these things are really important, but it's just kind of giving you a ballpark idea of where to begin or how much to invest in something, because you kind of are understanding how much it's helping. Household water saving, number 46. So it's a really big deal, these ways that we can have an impact on environmental degradation. And then there is no planet B. If you've ever had a question about how to save the planet or your impact on the planet or what makes a big difference or a small difference, this book is great. He has laid it out like a giant Q&A. And so your kind of question or something super related to your question could be in there already with some solutions. And he's not an extremist. He's very moderate, and has his, like, he's very grounded in how he thinks through issues. So it's very practical. And I really appreciate the work that's been put into it. He is British. So some of the things don't translate quite as well to like practical life in the US, but still really, really great. I loved it. You all are awesome. You probably already care about these things, but I do normally give a why before I give a how. So like, why church communities should care. God cares about the planet. God made the planet. It's gorgeous. We could talk about theology forever. Probably several of you are pastors. And climate change is a matter of life and death for humans, because 3 out of 4 people living in poverty rely on agriculture and natural resources to survive. And, when we use more than our fair share or degrade things that are not ours alone, we affect other people. We have a huge impact on the planet and the people that live on it. So here we go. What churches and pastors can do. I have this as an outline at the very end. So if you don't want to take vigorous notes, you don't have to, but start with yourself. This is so important. And don't mishear me. So the number one thing that I want you to do is commune with nature. Probably you're already doing this. But cultivate wonder, cultivate gratitude, look out your window. Even if all you can do is like notice a tree, like maybe you don't have time to go camping or something really involved, or it's expensive to take a trip somewhere, like notice a tree, notice a flower, listen for birds wherever you are. I had the most like beautiful moment the other day, listening to a bird, and I think I was in a driveway somewhere. So it's not like you have to like get away to do this. But if you don't have any kind of relationship with nature, it's going to be a lot harder to keep kind of fueling your fire of caring about these things, because it just becomes something that is meaningful to you. And then you can preach and teach. I think people think they need to be perfect before they can preach and teach about caring for creation. And it's just not the case. I think your people will respond just as well to a humble sense of confession in your sermons. Phrases like, I'm not perfect on this either. I don't have this all figured out. I need help too. Like your people will respond well to a sense of humility surrounding these things. So you'll notice step 2 is not get your act together and become zero waste before you can start talking about it, right? Step 2 is dive in. What does the word of God say, and how can you communicate that to your people? One of my favorite stories is from Mark, where Jesus calms the storm. It's a powerful story of trust and communion between Jesus and nature. I think this story is written so that people will know that Jesus is God and Jesus is all powerful. But the wind and the waves did not need this story to know who Jesus was and to respond to the call of Jesus in their actions. So stories like this, where people in the story are kind of interacting with nature or being affected by nature, or even just the agricultural parables of Jesus, are myriad. And you could spend so much time preaching through the way that Jesus talks about caring and good soil. And there's so much there. It's so rich. And I would encourage you, if you don't know where to begin, to like really look for resources and kind of dive in. We can talk about a few if you need them. Okay, so then beyond yourself, right? This is for your church community. You want to gather a team, because if it's just you communing and preaching and teaching and whatever, like you're not going to get as far on your like journey to help your church care about this stuff as if you had a team. And your lay people could be pretty powerful. There's probably is not the right word, but I can imagine there might be someone in your congregation that is like more up on some of this stuff than you are, has some knowledge to share with you, some wisdom to give you. And you can learn from the people on this team just as much as they do from you. I would even encourage you, well, we'll talk about that later. Okay. So what your team does. So this is the team, right? Once you've got this team, let's say it's like 5 people, or it's you and a couple people, or it's a board committee, it's whatever. They are going to get educated and educate others. And often this educate others will include you, right? Because you're a learner, a co-learner on this journey to save the planets, to care about creation. So they're going to get educated and they're going to educate others. Then some practical things that they can do as a committee, and not all at once. Please don't overwhelm your team, but they can evaluate your land. So for instance, at OKC First, we had a lawn service, and we just let the lawn service do what the lawn service does. And we never asked them, like, what is that you're spraying? How are you treating our flower beds? Like, are there, chemicals or pesticides that we could be switching from a more eco-friendly option? And they've even had a few different, something that they were trying to kill. And we were like, is there a non-toxic option for that? And they're like, oh yeah, we just do vinegar and dish soap. And like, it was like, they had it figured out. We just hadn't asked them to do that for us. So that was a really easy switch for us. But you can also do things like a pollinator garden. These are pretty easy, and many certifications, you only need like 200 square feet of pollinator habitat to be certified. So this kind of thing is also great for millennials, parking in your parking lot for the first time. They see a little sign like this. That seems pretty meaningful. Then you can evaluate the waste. Trash and food are probably the top 2 for most places. You can reduce your waste, like we talked about, is important to reduce. You can compost on site, or you could try to work with a local composting kind of co-op, which we have here in Oklahoma City. And you can recycle. Hopefully you can recycle. I guess it depends on your municipality and where you are and how those things work. And then you can evaluate the energy. So you could reduce your energy use. You could switch to renewables if that's an easy solution where you live. Often it's not. You can start a LED light bulb fund, or whatever you need to do to kind of reduce your energy use and waste. Maybe a volunteer comes up Sunday nights and makes sure everything is turned off for the rest of the week or whatever. And then you can encourage your congregants, or this team could encourage your congregants, because it's one thing to like reduce the energy usage of your church, but it's just as powerful, if not more powerful, if everyone in your congregation could get on board with reducing their energy usage too. So your congregation has just as much impact on the planet, if not more, than your church, building or property or whatever. And then you can encourage your community. This is a photo of Parks and Rec, but the biggest landowner in Oklahoma City is the Parks and Recreation Department of Oklahoma City. So we have reached out to them on a few different things, and let's face it, they own acres and acres and acres of land in our municipality, and what they spray matters, and how they care matters. And we as a church community can say, hey, we live here, we pay bills, like we care about what happens. Another place is businesses. Golf courses in Oklahoma City also own tons of land and have an impact on the planet. Maybe someone in your church has a lawn service, and you could encourage them to tell their customers about, more eco-friendly options and offer more eco-friendly options. So businesses have a huge impact on the planet. Many of us have business people in our churches, maybe not owners, but maybe people that work someplace who could advocate within their place of business to care about the planet a little more. And if you want a screenshot, this is the outline of the practical to do things. Commune with nature, gratitude, wonder, preach a message of hope for the planet, gather a team who will get educated, evaluate the land, waste, energy, encourage the congregants, and encourage the community. And please do not at any point think you have to be perfect or I have to be perfect. I am not perfect, and I'm giving this webinar. You are not perfect, and you can preach to your congregation. So keep that in mind as you go forward. And then these are some helpful links. I made a couple of them tiny URLs because they were super long, but these are all like PDF kind of e-guides. Interfaith Power and Light has a cool congregations startup kit. So if you're wondering like, where do we start? That's a great resource to have on hand. And then there's a website called Zero Waste Church, and they really focus on the trash and food waste of your church. So it's a little less about the energy and such, but they do have a guide, a how-to guide. So I've put that on a tiny URL, Zero Waste Church PDF. And then a program called Blessed Tomorrow has a carbon neutral guide for congregations. And I thought that was really helpful. It's a good read, so you can kind of click through that. And it's tiny URL, Church Carbon Guide. So yeah, hopefully those things are helpful. And then, we're scriptural. So here we go. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. This one's close to near and dear to my heart, because I really do think that creation is like waiting on us to get our act together in so many ways. So yeah, and then I'll go back and let you have those. Okay, that's all.
Awesome. Thank you, Brit Bolerjack. So good. There's there's so much there from your journey and your own story, to kind of, where a lot of us are coming from, which, in the local church setting in our own lives. And I do, not to belabor the questions, but I do think that's such an important part of all of this that we skip over sometimes is searching back to our own story and how each of us sort of got here, to where we care about this, and connecting those dots and telling those stories. So I want to take a few minutes, and I would love for you guys to either type in your questions, or if you're brave and you want to unmute yourself, we could jump in that way. And I'd love to dig a little deeper. I know there's probably lots of sort of nuts and bolts questions that we could kind of get to, and so feel free to jump into some of that. And while people are typing their questions, I will say, when you there at the end, it made me think of when we did the Creation Care Summit in Flint. It's like one of the first things we did when we got there, sort of snuck in and we hid all the trash cans in like this back Sunday school room. And because before the summit, we had sort of said it's going to be a culture of zero waste, and so that's kind of part of it for me. I think is creating a culture in your local church of saying this is important, not just because of our landfills are filling up, but because of what we believe. So what would it mean for our people to be a people of reusables, right? Anyway, but go ahead, and I would love to hear some questions from folks about maybe how this practically fleshes out for you, or other questions you might have. So feel free to jump those in the chat, or just unmute yourself or raise your hand. And yeah.
How do you break the ice with anti-tree huggers? How do you break the ice with anti-tree huggers, Ruben? Yeah. I'll be honest, I usually make it about money. This will save us X number of dollars. We pay every time that dumpster gets taken. So if we could pay once a month instead of twice a month, it would save us, XYZ. And I usually start from a kind of finance perspective. I don't know if that's super pastoral, but most of these things are about reduction. So at the end of the day, it's going to save us money.
Jesus talked about money all the time.
Yeah. So it's going to save us money, in these 8 different areas to do these things or whatever. Yeah, that's usually where I started, to be honest.
That's good. Yeah, I think anytime you crunch the numbers on a lot of this stuff, it always, makes the most sense. Even talking about a perspectives of just waste, right? Like nobody likes waste,
Mm,
right? And I think there's a lot of common ground and a lot of common narratives, even in scripture, obviously. But yeah, that's good.
yeah. James, the hardest area I have found to make change. For me personally, the hardest area has been getting people to reduce their consumption of meat and animal products. Um, if you read Drawdown, that's like one of the top 10 is focusing on a plant-rich diet. And people just, I live in Oklahoma where 60% of agriculture is about animals. So it's hard to convince people to do a little less on the animal front. Usually I just tell them a sob story about a chicken and make it about my pets, and see how that far I can get with that. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. So individual change from other people is the hardest. A lot of people will be like, oh, well, that's good for you, but I could never, whatever it is, I could never do that. I think that's a lot harder than changing things at church, because at church I just need to get like 3 or 4 people on board and we do the thing, but individual lives, I like helping people change what they're doing at home, I think is the hardest part. Zero waste communion practices during COVID. I don't necessarily, because I am not in charge of communion at OKC First. But if it were me, I would probably have like wafers in a bowl and do the kind of, I don't know, people get their own communion thing. Megan probably has more ideas about that than I do because she's all about that life.
Doing is we put instead of breaking the bread when someone walks up, the bread's like already in pieces on a plate, or we've even used crackers a couple of times because it's like they're just like easier to spread out, already on a plate or already on a couple of napkins on the table, and they walk up and get it. We used to do intinction, so you take it right there. Instead, you hold on to your cracker, and then people bring their own cup from home, or I just have like a basket of extra like cups that, jars, or have a lot of metal, like enamelware kinds of cups we use with the kids and stuff, so they just can't break easy. And then I'm pouring the juice like into everyone's cup as they come up, just like a little tiny bit, right? And then they go back to where they were sitting, and then we take off our masks and partake together. So just the differences has been like, then we're not sharing the common cup, right? And then they're not pulling their mask down when they're not far from me to take. That's what we're doing. It's worked really pretty well.
Love that.
That's great.
James?
Can I tell a kind of sob horror story about communion during COVID? We turned up on the first Sunday when we'd reopened, and UHT milk capsules. Someone had found those for communion. So it's a top layer, then wafer, and then second layer, and it's the wine. And we've been using those the whole time, and it's just, I cringe every single time I go in the building because it's just horrifying.
Oh yeah. Sadly, that is what we are also doing. We fasted from communion for 9 months, and then people were like, we need communion. And yeah, the committee in charge of it just didn't want to get creative necessarily. So that's what we call them the sips and dips. We're doing that.
The communion committee.
I know.
Yeah, our congregation is similar to Megan's. I'll say we'll have like on the altar table kind of a bunch of different plates, and each plate is for a pod or a family or a group. And at the beginning, we purchased these sort of glass beakers, and we have these little compostable cups. So we moved from sort of large group intinction to sort of like small pod group intinction, and or little compostable cups that and the plates have the bread, and so very similar. But yeah, it's I've heard many difficult conversations around this.
Yeah, it's been rough, but whatever, I don't have to say. Oh, yes, okay. Nuts and bolts questions. Sustainable job site. Yeah, so Best sustainable swaps that I've made to reduce waste in my daily routine. Honestly, the best one is probably like our heat and air, which we have barely used. So like just reducing our like energy consumption. I'm also the one that pays the bills, so I get way more excited about paying an electric bill for $100 than I do for $300, which happened to us when we first moved into the house because I think we just weren't aware of how much we were using. But probably the most like helpful thing that we do, honestly, is just reducing our packaging. And for us, that's a lot of farmers market shopping. We go to the farmers market every Saturday morning, and you can buy almost anything you need there, very loose, with very little packaging, and it has less shipping miles on it. You know, the average food, the average meal in America traveled 1,400 miles to your plate, you know, once you kind of add it all up. So local food usually has less packaging, but also definitely has less miles of gasoline and fossil fuels getting it to your plate. So that's probably the most impact that we've had.
Cool. Yeah, other questions that folks have, big or small, whichever direction. So this is kind of a cool opportunity we get to chat for just a couple more minutes.
Transformation story from our congregation. Yes. So there is a woman, her name is Barbie. And she saw something that I did on Facebook. I did kind of a little update on how zero waste is going on Facebook. And she commented and she was like, wow, I've just never thought of any of this stuff. And she's like in her late 60s, I would say late 60s. And so pretty like, you know, ingrained in her ways, but she sends me an update now every week of all the new things that she's doing and trying. She read a book on going zero waste from the library, and she's just like so proud of herself, and it's so inspiring. Like, honestly, I think she's doing a couple of things that like I haven't even tried yet, and she's just so pumped. She's been doing it for like 4 or 5 months. And she's like, I'm almost there. And just like, you're doing great. I'm just like amazed by her commitment and progress, and the way that it's helping like her kids think about the planet too, even though they're, you know, grown adults kind of thing. Yes, go to Megan's webinar in July because they'll be talking more about food miles there and eating together.
Right.
So love that. Very
cool. We've got just another minute here if anyone has any other last burning questions on your heart. This webinar will be available for free for 1 week following this at NazarenesForCreationCare.com.
Hey.
Then after that will be available at the Center for Pastoral Leadership through NTS. So yeah, any last questions? Again, that lifelong learning code is 41110 if you need that. And yeah, Brit, we appreciate you so much for taking some time with us here. You know, I think so much of this feels overwhelming, but really, I think at the end of the day, it has a lot to do with kind of what you said about being willing to have these conversations in our local churches and talk about this more. I know Catherine Hayhoe talks a lot about like the missing piece here is just that we talk about this more and more often. And I know there can be a lot of pushback, unfortunately, depending on where you live. And so it's just the more groundwork that we've got to do with preaching and teaching and sharing about the importance of this. So anyway, thank you, Brit, and thanks everyone for your time today. I want to honor everyone's time. Yeah, thank you so much. We'll leave it there. No one else has any last questions.
Thanks for having me.
And I look forward to connecting with everyone next month as we talk a little bit more about clean energy in particular. So thanks, everyone.